Hello everyone, my name is Zhen. I'm the leading author of this Chapter 4, China and Global Hegemonic Order, Economic Hegemony and Soft Approaches to Security Competition. I'm here to present the argument and evidence we have in this chapter. So the research question we try to push forward in this chapter is why the current power transition between China and the US has not caused intense military competition as many realist surveys would predict. Answers to this question are important because they hint on the future international order, and it reminds us about how can we control the tension or even damage of major power competition today. In history, we know that competition for world hegemony has often associated with military confrontation or even systemic wars. So, first, let's define the concepts. Hegemony is defined as the capacity of an actor with overwhelming capacity to shape the international system through both coercive and non-coercive means. I want to highlight three keywords in this definition. First, one actor. Second, overwhelming capacity. Third, in both coercive and non-coercive means. Put these three conditions together, this definition means the competition for hegemony is inherently zero-sum. There can be only one actor that dominates others in both coercive and non-coercive means. So if the win means the loss of another nation, then we may expect intense hegemonic competition in the near future. However, international relations studies on hegemony has developed beyond this traditional definition. Two major trends on hegemonic studies have emerged in recent years. One is about the studies on the complicated means of competition employed by major powers. These complicated means include not only military competition, but more importantly, diplomatic, political, and economic means such as soft balancing, economic statecraft, and institutional balancing. So the other trend is to explore the variations in the characteristics of the hegemon. It suggests all hegemons rise in certain domestic, international, and historical contexts. These contexts shape the characteristics and behaviors of a rising hegemon. So each hegemon is different, is unique by its own characteristics. These 2 points echoes with the multi-hegemony argument advanced by Professor K. Song in this edited volume. So in this chapter, we advanced an argument that in the contemporary world, there can be multiple hegemonies that have different configurations of power. Specifically, a rising hegemon may be economically strong and can influence other states and systems through economic means, but it also can be militarily weak at the same time. So the contemporary international system has several mechanisms that provide security checks to this type of economic hegemon. Those conditions include nuclear weapons, military technology development favoring defense over offense, the proliferation of international institutions, and economic interdependence. So the security of this kind of economic hegemons are guaranteed under those conditions. They don't have to also become military hegemon just to defend the national security. And for this type of economic hegemon, prematurely engaging with military competition against the incumbent power is unwise, because this will interrupt its economic growth, bring legitimacy crisis, and most importantly, the economic hegemon is likely to lose in such military competition. Meanwhile, there also can be traditional hegemon that is militarily strong but economically in decline. These two types of hegemon have their own weakness, and they cannot completely lock out the opponent in a hegemonic competition in a short time. Therefore, we are likely to see these two types of hegemony coexist in international system for a relatively long time. To test this argument, we hypothesize that China should continue to build up its hegemonic power through economic and other soft means and restrains its military tension with other nations. So we use China's case to test this hypothesis. China is already the number 2 economy in the world. Depending on which predictions we use, Generally, the prediction is that if the current trend of development continues, China's economy will surpass the US between 2030 and 2045, by the latest, probably 2050. So here we want to emphasize the rule-making capacity in Chinese economic power because by definition, rising powers gain hegemonic status when it can influence rules and norms at the global level. So when a rising powers can change from a rule maker, change from a rule taker and become a rule maker, then we see that rising powers gain hegemonic status. In Chapter 4, we highlight the role of the BRICS Development Bank, Contingent Reserve Arrangement, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. These institutions clearly distinguish themselves with the neoliberal institutions in many aspects, well, in 3 aspects. First, they provide loans to developing countries without attaching conditions that may damage the policy sovereignty of the recipient states. Second, their loans are more borrower-centered rather than lender-centered. So it's more developing countries may find it's easier to borrow from these banks. Third, especially in the NDB and the CRA case, each member state have equal rights in the decision-making process in these institutions. So it's unlike the IMF or World Bank, one economic hegemon, that's the US, has de facto veto power in the neoliberal institutions. So, in short, while China's norm or rule-making power in global economic governance is still limited, China has distinguished itself from other emerging economies because other emerging economies often passively accept the rules made by the liberal hegemony, but China now has gradually becoming a norm maker or a rule maker in global economy. We also find many evidence that China, especially before 2012, has adopted soft means in political and security issues. We identify several mechanisms in this chapter. So taking the partnership relations as an example, so China has not adopted security alliance concepts to define its relations with foreign countries, with just one exception. So officially, China only has one alliance relation, that is with North Korea. For China's relations with all other countries and with many international institutions, such as EU, China used a different concept, that is a partnership concept, to define their relations. So the partnership concept, they often covers a wide range of cooperation issues and often use non-binding agreements to coordinate cooperations between China and foreign states or foreign organizations. It allows China to build economic cooperation with nations that may have conflicting political or security interests against China. For example, China and India still cooperated in many issues such as development, international finance, and obviously the BRICS 2020 cooperation agenda. And they also communicated effectively under their strategic partnership mechanisms even when they had a border clash in 2020. And by March 2021, both sides agreed to disengage their troops in the front line and technically, at least for now, solved their border dispute at this moment. One important thing is that we need to see that our argument has an important caveat. So we assume rational decision making for hegemonic leaders. Emotional or ideological commitment may make the rising hegemon diverge away from such a rational approach. Nationalism or the miscalculation of power ratio may make the leaders of a rising hegemony prematurely challenge the incumbent hegemon or other nations in non-economic realms. China's recent conflicts with India and China's behavior in South China Sea are examples here. So our argument does not exclude such outcomes. Instead, we suggest such premature security competition is suboptimal for a rising economic hegemon. In short, we use China as an example in this chapter to show China, at least before 2012, has focused on economic power and restrained itself from security and political power competition. Had China continued to adopt this strategy, we could observe the coexistence of an economic and a political hegemony in the contemporary international relations. For the incumbent political hegemon, so the main combat area is economy. It will need to revive its economy and continue to provide economic public good to a large number of following nations. Only by this way, the incumbent hegemon can defend its position and maintain its superiority in the international hierarchy system. So that's our chapter 4. Thank you very much.